everyone. Welcome to our session today. And this is an introduction to LLMs and Agentic AI. This is brought to you by Altitude Accelerator. My name is Hessie Jones, and I'm happy to be introducing Amir Feizpour, who will lead this session. And this is going to be the first of a two-part series. So today we are going to cover the definitions of agentic as well as AI, our AI large language models. What do you need to do uh, what questions you actually need to ask when you're building a solution using this technology. Amir will also cover some use cases. I think he'll also do a demo, and he'll also discuss some of the scaffolding and safeguards. And this is going to be more important as AI plays a vital role in our future, where it starts to connect with many parts of our lives. So just to give you an indication, the second part of the series will introduce Abigail Dubinetsky, who is a privacy lawyer. She's a tech strategist, and she'll talk about the unintended consequences of this technology and what startups should think about in the early product development stages to address some of those concerns. And she's going to be joined by Patricia Thane, who is the founder and chairwoman of Private AI, and her solution is a privacy layer for LLMs, APIs, contact centers, etc., that identifies and reduces personally identifiable information for both structured and unstructured data. So she's going to talk about her solution and how startups can be compliant from the outset. And we're going to email you with the details in the coming weeks. So a little bit about Amir Feizpour. I actually met Amir, I believe it was pre-pandemic, and we were part of a community already collaborating on the impacts of this impending thing called large language models that was coming in the horizon. We had, during that time, we actually put together some governance proposals, as well as we started developing open source privacy approaches in dealing with these LLMs. So Amir is the founder and CEO and chief scientist of Aggregate Intellect, and building a generative brain for business brain for service and science-based companies. And he has this amazing global community, which he has grown to almost 5,000 plus AI practitioners as well as researchers gathered around topics for AI research, engineering, product development, as well as responsibility. So prior to this, he was an NLP product lead at RBC. He has a PhD in physics from U of T and was also a researcher at Oxford University, where he conducted experiments in quantum computing, resulting in many high-profile patents. So, like I said, he's a community builder, and he's also an AI ecosystem advisor for Mars. He's an EIR at North Forge and Lab to Market, and he also leads R&D collaborations with some amazing institutions like McGill, U of T, and Alberta Intelligence Institute. So with that, before we get started, just some administrative notes. This session, like I said, the session is going to be recorded. It will be available on YouTube at a later point. I would ask that you mute yourselves during the presentation, and we'll also have time for questions at the end of Amir's presentation. So with that, I turn the floor over to Amir.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Hessie, and invitation to join you all here today. So I'm gonna go through a few slides, but hopefully we'll do an interactive demo at the end, and hopefully that will be interesting for you as well. So I'm going to need a volunteer for that interactive demo. So yeah, about 15-20 minutes to think if you want to volunteer for that, but we'll get there. So just giving you heads up. So all right, let's jump into it. So talking to founders about AI is one of my favorite topics because that's two of the several interesting things that are going on in my life right now. Being an entrepreneur, helping entrepreneurs, and of course, building AI. So the question that I usually ask in these kind of presentations is, what do you think founders in 5 will look like? So fast forward 10 years from now, what do you think they are like? And that's an actual question. So if you want to answer in the chat, please, what do you all think? Founders who are ahead of the game and up to speed on new technology, yes, 100%. Anyone else has any thoughts? Smaller teams, lots of personalized AI agents solving real-world business problems. Absolutely. Thanks for sharing tonight. What else? Any other thoughts? We need a third one before we go ahead. Novel AI agents for special purposes. Thanks for sharing that, Ryan. Yes, definitely. So I'm going to interpret Essie's answer to also say agents instead of new technologies. So that's definitely how essentially see will become 60% founded companies because founders, they're not AI founders. Like that probably will drop at some point in the next 10 years, but everybody is a founder, and there will be several, maybe many, maybe it is commonplace, single person founded companies. And the reason that they can do that is that the barrier of entry for entrepreneurship is increasingly dropping, like not only because of AI agents, but because of many other dimensions, like cloud cost is dropping, cost of acquiring data is dropping, internet and global access, etc., etc. But also very importantly, AI agents, as everybody pointed out. So I don't think we necessarily will have autonomous systems that run the world, but I think there will be very smart, ambitious humans who are in the middle of an exoskeleton powered by AI agents, like an exoskeleton powered by AI agents that take care of a lot of dimensions of the business that they need to, right? So in some areas, they might have more expertise. Like this person might be a salesperson, but is empowered by agents that are, handling the engineering and the product, human and machine resources, and the internal operations, or vice versa. They might be a technical person, and the agents are helping them with, the more business side of things. So there's definitely a leveling scenario that is going to go on as we have more capable AI agents around us. And part of the demo that I will show you is how I personally, as a founder, use these kind of technologies to do some of this today, even, right? So hopefully that will give you some inspirations. So I would like to sort of quickly introduce myself a little more. I know Hessie did a pretty comprehensive intro, but I want to sort of also tell you what gives me the authority to stand here and tell you about AI agents. So a bit on the personal side, these are some of the things that I like doing. I enjoy exercise. My go-to is long distance running, but I'm currently injured. I really like coffee. I hand grind my coffee every morning. And go through the whole process of very slow brewing and all that. So, and I also enjoy reading and writing. I do on the event page. You probably saw, link to my Substack where my essays are. So definitely take a look at these and reach out if any of these activities are interesting to you. As he said, my background is in quantum computing. I studied at University of Toronto. I briefly worked at University of Oxford for a couple of years. After that, in 2017, I decided that I wanted to join industry, and I worked as an NLP scientist at Royal Bank of Canada for 3 years. During this time, I started a community called ACE that is still around, more than 6,000 people globally. I noticed that this slide is slightly out of date, but ignore that. And in 2019, I started Aggregate Intellect. The very first sort of mission statement was redefining scientific discovery, and hence the website, AI.Science. But over time, we ended up pivoting away from that initial idea towards initially in 2020, we were very focused on using AI in education. Then we thought that we can use AI to drive an R&D marketplace. After that, we thought that we can use AI to build a knowledge management tool for corporate innovation teams. And fast forward today, we are very focused on doing R&D and commercial work on systems that are sophisticated interfaces between expert humans and machines to execute complex knowledge work. I can explain what this means if anybody is interested. But as you can see, there's a gap here, and this gap was ChatGPT, right? So at the end of 2022, ChatGPT came out, which was a very interesting web application. Like the model behind it was almost as good as what we saw at the end of 2022, much earlier in 2022. And a lot of us were interacting with those models as developers. But all of a sudden, it came to the forefront of attention for the global audience, just because of the particular product choice that they made. And they created this and set it up as a chat interface. So that really changed everything. Like it enabled us to do significantly more complicated type of R&D and commercial work, while also did us a favor by getting the market to be very ready about this new future that is coming. So since 23, we've been largely focused on. So after 23, we didn't continue the product ambition that we had, and have been mostly in survival mode and doing service work. But I started sharing this recently. It's a bit of a stealth mode, but I'm sharing it here and there, saying that we are in the process of relaunching our business as an AI-first venture studio. So if you're not familiar with venture studios, I encourage you to take a look at them. But essentially, the core idea is that we think that given the technology that we have, which is mostly around agentic workflow automation of business workflows, and the fact that we spent several years making all the go-to-market strategy mistakes, if you combine these two pieces of knowledge and figure out the right audience to work with, and given that we have a very large community of AI researchers, engineers, and founders, if you put all of these ingredients together, then we can start incubating businesses that are interesting AI-first businesses. So there's a whole level of thesis and a specificity that goes around, and if anybody is interested, I'm happy to tell you more about it. But essentially, after several years of building and launching AI applications at corporate and in startup, today we are very focused on essentially becoming a studio that launches more businesses, because of the same reason that I said before. Like the cost of becoming an entrepreneur is decreasing very rapidly, and the expectation is that in the next few years, in the next decade, the cost will be so low that everybody can be an entrepreneur, and we would like to be the fertile ground where a lot of these types of entrepreneurship ideas flourish. So now shifting gears a bit into the topic of the day, which is large language models. And a term that I've been throwing around is knowledge ops. So sort of like historically, we have talked about topics like DevOps and ML ops. And what these did that were quite interesting was that, for example, DevOps created a bridge between development and operations, which was before DevOps. Prior to DevOps, they were treated as independent functions, but DevOps provided a set of tools and processes that enabled teams to develop and operationalize at the same time using a series of automations and processes, right? And the consequence of that was a significant lift in the ability and in the productivity of developers, because they could quickly test a new feature, deploy it, get some user data, and reflect and refine it, right? So there was no longer a need for them to throw the developed software over the wall to the operations teams and wait for them to deploy it. And maybe 3 months later, they get some data and realize that, oh, damn, that feature was wrong. So just the iteration rate significantly increased, which means that the quality of the initial initial ideas didn't improve necessarily, but your ability to quickly invalidate bad ideas significantly increased. And the continuation of that idea expanded to machine learning, obviously, with ML ops, because now we had systems that could crunch data quickly, come up with forecasts and projections, and then deploy them. And so these are essentially more sophisticated software systems that included ML components, machine learning components. But again, the same idea, like essentially, if you had ML ops, it meant that you could handle the data ingestion, quality checks, deployment, collecting data, and refining. All of those, can be operationalized very quickly using automation and processes, and allowed us to build much more interesting AI-based software. And this was the big topic in the years up to when ChatGPT took over the conversation. And I think what ChatGPT enabled is what I like to call knowledge ops, because even in both of these scenarios, there is still that gap where the process of observing the data and deciding what you need to try next is still completely manual, because it is a cognitively difficult task and it requires logic and reasoning, which means that these processes, although they significantly improve the prior processes, but they were still, bottlenecked by how quickly a human can come in and interpret the results and decide the next step. And tools like large language models are essentially reducing the cognitive labor there, because they provide us very good tools for quickly, brainstorming and interpreting data and coming up with experiments that we should do. So I think we are essentially entering an era where the barrier between knowledge work and operations related to that knowledge work are breaking, and these are integrating. And there are a lot of very good questions about what will be the role of humans in this new era, and we can talk about it. But I think this is the era that we are entering, that essentially work that is knowledge intensive and operations around it are merging and becoming more automated and more streamlined. So, and there are a lot of interesting implications for this, and we can talk about those if anybody's interested. So, to tell you more concretely about how we ended up here, I usually like to think about the evolution of large language model products. So as I said, at the end of 2022, the very interesting, reflection point was ChatGPT, which was largely the large language model that was fine-tuned for chat interactions with a relatively simple UI, user interface that was presented to us, and all of a sudden, a lot of us got really excited about what it could do. Again, like the model was already largely available before this, but this product choice was a very interesting product choice to set it up as a chat interface and provide it through a UI to the public. So very quickly, we noticed that there's a lot of hallucination, factual grounding and such. So this was the big conversation in 2023. And all of a sudden, people realized that there was a paper a couple of years ago that said, oh, you could actually separate large language models and the data sources and knowledge bases and use a knowledge base to feed what the LLM says to reduce hallucination and ground it in actual data that is relevant to your context, like, for example, your business. So this is what RAG is, and a lot of people got super excited about this, and late 23, early 24 was dominated by vector database companies that were popping up and saying that, oh, we can help you do RAG and use your company data and such. But of course, very quickly we realized that even this is not sophisticated enough, and we need a bunch of software stuff around all of these to make sure they work robustly and with a high business grade accuracy, right? So things like security, privacy, relevance of the fetch data, refinement of the retrieved data, guardrailing, all of these became very interesting and important topics, mostly in 24. And their intersection with large language models and knowledge base and data sources. And how do you keep track of what's going on in the system so that you can deliver more relevant results as the user interacts with the system for longer, right? So this is what I call a proper RAG. So essentially a system that has the software components of a proper scalable production ready software versus what vector DB companies were trying to convince you, which is, oh, all you need is a vector DB and an LLM. So this is what a lot of people started building in 2024 for various business use cases. I think still a significant number of use cases, this is their solution. Like you could call it agent or whatever you want, but ultimately this is what you're executing in those systems. Of course, like as soon as we started thinking about LLMs as an interface that can interact with data, we very quickly realized that, oh, actually, they're very good at writing code or generating structured data. So if you remember, like when the function calling in ChatGPT came out or GPT API came out, that was exactly the intuition that, what if we could get the LLM to interface us with various tools, even get them to plan. Like this planning thing, started before reasoning models were huge. And we realized that we can get LLMs to come up with a plan of how something can be solved. And perhaps the huge interest in these was the reason that the reasoning models became very attractive. And putting all of these together, all of a sudden the system started looking like humans. And that's where the name agents became very popular, because these are software systems that can plan, use tools to execute those plans, can use data sources to be more contextually relevant, and they can keep track of what is going on in the system. So sort of a memory of what's happening. And of course, as soon as we started talking about that, it was relevant to also start thinking about, what if you have a bunch of these interacting with each other to try to solve a more complicated problem? And products or / libraries like Crew AI popped up, where their value proposition was, what if you had 5 AI agents as your crew that run everything in your business? Of course, very quickly we understood that just getting agents to talk to each other is not a good way to build robust software systems. And a whole set of libraries and tools and frameworks started appearing around orchestration of multiple agents. And of course, like I'm sure it is very relevant for many use cases, but since we are very interested in more complex business workflows and innovation workflows, um, I believe that in the foreseeable future, even the next decade, the majority of the next decade, it's very unlikely to be able to just remove humans completely from the equation. So the types of systems we research and build are almost always human in the loop, because we want the human tacit knowledge to be involved in any system we build. So sort of this is how I describe it, like multi-agent, multiplayer systems are the ones that I'm particularly interested in. And I think that they will be the next frontier. Like today, you might have Cursor as one of your agents. In a different window, you might have, I don't know, Claude open for brainstorming. But the John and Jane that you are should also be involved in this conversation. And I think we're going to see a lot of interesting frameworks that will come out that are strictly in this space of orchestrating all of these interactions. Like, Jane and John are trying to collaborate, and as they're trying to collaborate, they have two co-workers that are, I don't know, Claude and Cursor agents as well, right? So this is the type of thing that I think is coming up in terms of technology direction. We already are seeing some of it, but this is, I will not be surprised if next year is the year of context engineering and orchestration frameworks, right? So just going back to the question that I asked at the beginning, and by the way, if you have questions or comments about anything I'm saying, please put them in the chat, and I'm happy to take them. I'm occasionally looking at the chat. So going back to what I asked at the beginning, today this is slightly easier, but the typical process is still that you have to figure out what your objectives are and what tasks are necessary to achieve that objective. Maybe you brainstorm with ChatGPT, but still, you're the driver here, who's doing a lot of the activities. Then you have to prioritize those tasks. Then you have to use various types of tools to gather information about it. You have to test and reflect and refine and repeat. And you have to keep doing this process as a human founder many, many times every day, potentially, right? And sort of the vision is that by 2035, as a single person entrepreneur, as a single founded company, you will be able to use the language skills, reasoning skills, and tool usage skills that the language models of the next few years will enable to do this much, much, much faster. Like essentially, I'm not proposing that you will be removed from the loop, but you could do this much faster and with a much broader scope, right? Like you can explore many more ideas per day rather than having to go through the grind of exploring one idea every 5 days, right? So definitely a significant increase in the iteration rate that I think is very attractive for entrepreneurs, right? So, and of course, like we have to also ground ourselves. Like everything that I'm talking about is a grand vision of the future, but all of us want to build or use AI agent systems that can integrate flawlessly into the wild chaos of our world, with unpredictable environments and actors. And we want AI agents to just navigate that gracefully and deliver on the objectives that we have. But the reality is that we are at the beginning of that journey, and a lot of what we can build and a lot of what we can use today need to be heavily guardrailed and heavily controlled and heavily, be heavily focused on very specific set of workflows for now, until we build sophisticated enough systems that can actually give us what we want. I'm sure our want will still navigate, away from us into the more things that we want, but at least today this is where we are, and we're hoping to get to this tomorrow, relatively soon, right? So I'm going to shift gears a little and start talking about there's a question in the chat that says, Do you think that developing novel AI models for a specific engineering use can be a good idea to solve the existing problem in that specific field? I'm going to generalize that question a little bit. So the generalization of that question for me is, do I think if vertically focused models are a good investment? My answer is absolutely. With the caveat, with the asterisk that I don't necessarily think that the model itself needs to be vertically aligned. I think the LLM or the AI system needs to be vertically aligned for a very specific and niche use case. The model might be generic, like I don't know, a GPT model or Claude or whatever else, but it is sitting inside a system design that is very vertically aligned, right? So you might say, okay, my use case is this particular thing in civil engineering. Of course, one scenario is to develop, very capable reasoning models that understand everything about engineering, civil engineering, and such. But that's a very expensive value proposition. I'm sure some people are excited about doing that, but for most of us, for the rest of us, let's say, who don't have millions of dollars in our bank account to burn on it, the option that is very available is building AI systems that use pre-trained models, maybe with fine-tuning, maybe with smart, system designs that allow us to handle a very specific use case, say inside engineering, and start getting the market, like taking over the market that helps us collect data that will help us develop more novel models, et cetera, et cetera. So I think the answer is yes, but the path to it depends on how much money is in your bank account. Hope that answers your question. Okay, so I want to talk about near term, which that question was a very good segue to it, right? So what do I think is going to happen over the next few years? So in order to answer that question, I want to walk through the landscape of ideas that have been appearing in the past few years, past 3 years or so. And I usually like to talk about this in terms of the workflow that we need to execute, given different types of tasks that we have at hand. So I have a few axes here. So on the horizontal axis, I'm looking at the complexity increasing to the right. The secondary horizontal axis is established best practices and accuracy constraints, increasing to the left, sorry. And then on the vertical axis is the amount of available process data. So I'm not talking about just any data. I'm talking about the data that shows how something is done, right? So it is the process of getting something done. Like I'm not talking about, for example, just code generation. I'm talking about the process of figuring out what the requirements are, what the specs are, and then from the specs going into code, and then writing the code and writing tests for it, using the test to verify if the code works. Like that's a process, right? And do we have data that shows that process, that reasoning, that thought process, that execution process, that workflow? And if we have that data, can we use it to train our models to follow a similar execution process? So if you're talking about very simplistic workflows, like I have text, please summarize it. Like that's a two-step simple workflow, right? There's a lot of data for that on the internet. Therefore, majority of linguistic tasks were the first thing that large language models really dominated, right? Change the tone of this, change the voice of this, summarize this, do that. Like these are simple step process workflows, right? So a lot of these were, there were a lot of data for them on the internet and therefore relatively easy to handle. On the top right, a little towards the center, I put down tasks like coding and math. Because these are extremely popular skills, there is a lot of data on the internet that explain how they can happen, right? So there are a lot of documentation, books, and stuff on the internet that says this is the process of software engineering. Follow these steps. Or if you look at the GitHub, commit histories, for example, for repos, you can see the process that they went through problem solving to write good code, right? So same with math. That's a super scalable skill that exists everywhere, and a lot of people try to teach others how to do it. And the important thing about both of these is that they are verifiable. Like the outcome of the process is something that you can probably verify. Like if you're doing an integral in math, what the result should be, follows the logic of math. Therefore, if you want to create a system that understands how to do math, you could probably just run the math and then run it through your model and then see if these two match. Same with coding. Like essentially, you could write tests and see if the system passes those tests or not, or does it execute at all. So these are verifiable tasks. That's why they're more interesting to look at initially, while there might be other types of skills that there might have equal amount of process data on the internet or available data sources, but they might not be verifiable, which makes them harder to work with. At the bottom left, we have RPA type of admin work. So these are like, I received an email, use this email information to book something in my calendar, and then send a follow-up email to this other person that triggers this thing in our ERP that issues like essentially very, very deterministic steps in the process that you can just use process automation to achieve them with mostly just if-else statements, right? So those are the stuff that are down here in this corner. And then there's this huge long tail of everything else, right? There are so many other things that don't cleanly fit into any of these buckets, but they're very important business processes that we are interested in. And we would like to see how AI can help us do this better. I would usually like to draw some borders in this landscape to make it easier for us to think. So in this top area where there is a lot of process data and the complexity of the workflows is not huge, that's where the existing large language models, the pre-training process and RL fine-tuning and decoding algorithms have been doing great. Like we are seeing a lot of use cases that fit here, and just a bare model plus a bit of fine-tuning and a bit of system design and some clever decoding, maybe even with some adapter-based fine-tuning. Like these are like 99% of use cases we're dealing with today, which is great. Like the ones that are, sorry, very, very, very strictly LLM-focused ones. We are also seeing a lot of progress in this corner. So almost every RPA delivery system out there have thrown in LLM capabilities, which means that you still are doing if-else logic to execute a workflow, but you have LLMs that can generate or check various types of if-else things that might need to happen in your system, right? So it gives you significant lift in terms of what kind of workflows you can do with just if-else statements, right? Because, for example, if there's a complicated email, you could first give it to an LLM that will decide if it is this type or that other type or this other type, and then use if-else to route it to the right set of actions, right? So it significantly expands the ability of the RPA systems if you throw in an LLM. On this top right corner, if you remember here, we had things like coding and math, and I pointed out that the thing that is interesting about them is that they are verifiable tasks. This is where we are seeing also a lot of activities because there is a lot of process data and because they're verifiable, a lot of the reasoning models are being trained using this data. But again, there's this massive area in the middle that is a bit of a no man's land currently, but a lot of us are starting to play there. And in my mind, the way you build solutions for this area, this middleman, is multimodal composite systems. As I said, this is not a scenario where a single model will necessarily solve the problem because we don't have enough data for the model to be naturally good. and the complexity of workflow is large enough that probably a single model cannot pull it off. You need some sort of a system design. Just to put in some logos to guide your eyes. So DeepSeek R1 made a huge amount of noise here. There are almost every single model provider out there has some version of that. The big players up here are obviously the big ones that you know and love. In this corner, we have tools like N8N and Zapier that are doing quite well, actually. Then in the middle, there are like a lot of what we call agentic frameworks that are trying to help you build composite systems. Tools like AutoGen comes to mind, LineGraph comes to mind. And there's a dotted line in the middle for me because a lot of the systems, at least where they started, they were relatively static. Like, the graph that you would build in a line graph to guide the behavior of your system was, pretty much static. Like you design it and you execute it. And tools like DSPy were the first ones that started doing it a little differently and saying, okay, what if we optimized how the system works by showing it a bunch of examples and fine-tuning some parameters in the system, not the model, in the system. So I think that's the general direction of where things are going. Like you're going from more static systems to more trainable composite systems. And we also have a library that is exactly trying to do the same type of migration. We started from single LLMs to composite static composite systems, and now our research is very squarely focused on how can we create trainable systems that can learn from user interactions and provide better composite systems. Essentially, the core idea, as you see, this arrow is pointing up a little because the static system can be used to collect some process data that will enable fine-tuning and training towards these areas that are currently inaccessible with the existing tools, right? So it's a bit of a complex landscape, but we are dealing with a complex landscape. But hopefully this visualization helps you understand where we are and where we are going and where the gaps are. And as founders, you should work on things that are addressing the gaps that need to be filled, right? So if you have any questions again about any of these, please put them in the chat. Whenever I present this in person, a lot of people, I noticed that a lot of people take snapshots of this screen. So if you want to take a screenshot and post it anywhere, feel free to do that as well if you find it helpful. All right, so I've been talking around agents quite a bit and sort of trying to give you coordinates about where agents fit into the conversation. So essentially, in the previous slide, I think this is where agents are essentially in this middle land where a single model might not necessarily be the best. You want to have a composite system that uses maybe several calls to the same model, potentially using multiple different models. You just structure all of that, scaffold all of that together to execute some complicated workflow. So that's what we mean when we say agents. But just to give you a formal definition, and I know that agents are used with many other definitions, but just to put something down so that we have something to reference. For me, an agent is a software product that uses artificial intelligence to reason and act on behalf of a human user, not as a tool, but as a partner in digital or knowledge work. So again, like you could have other definitions, you could expand this definition, et cetera, et cetera. But for the intents and purposes of this presentation, that's what I mean when I say agents. So let's go through it. A software product, this is telling you what this is. So I'm not talking about robotic systems. I'm strictly talking about software systems. What makes it possible is AI and knowledge work. I put that as an example because I think that's where it is making the significant and the most amount of disruption. More importantly, in this definition, I said it reasons and acts on behalf of a human user, right? So this is how it behaves mechanistically. So it is a self-directed planning and adaptation. So it is self-directed. It has planning ability, it has adaptation ability, and tool use ability. So nothing about this part to you says that it needs to interact gracefully with you. It just says it needs to be able to do things on its own without your intervention or with minimal amount of intervention from a human user, right? So that's what it defines as autonomy, right? So that's how autonomous is this? Like, going back to autonomous vehicles, the versions of vehicles that we've had so far, they're mostly self-directed. They plan the trips and execute it. They adapt if something shows up on the road, and they use tools that are available to them, like the steering wheel, et cetera, right? So they're mostly autonomous. Like, nothing about your interaction with them says uh, that there's anything specific going on. They're autonomously executing the task of navigating the roads. Separately, there's this other line here that says, you interact with them not as tools, but as partners. And that's interesting because that's the dimension that is available to us now that was not before, or it was a lot more limited. And the reason that this is available now is the ability of these large language model to use language to interact with us. So essentially, we can set up systems today that demonstrate or are perceived as agents because we perceive intentionality and independence in them. If you're coding with Cursor or Copilot or whatever, you can see that it's showing you perceive intention. Like, it is like, oh, I'm going to look at this directory now. I'm going to look at this file. I'm going to do this. Oh, I made a mistake. Let me undo that, etc. It looks like it has intention, right? Although it is designed to behave that way, but it looks like it has intention. And our brains perceive that as, oh, it does because it is doing these things, right? So that's what I call agency. And depending on the use case that you're dealing with, you need a different amount of autonomy or agency, and in a lot of cases, both, to achieve the objectives that your use case has. So as you can see, like, we throw agents as a term around, but as you can see, it has a lot of layers of complexity around what it is and how it is set up and what kind of ingredients it needs, right? Um, we run this boot camp, and a lot of people come to us and they're hoping that we would say, use LangGraph and do these things, and you have agents. And that's unfortunately not the case ever. The reality is that there is no one solution fit all. Like, agentic systems need to be built around the particular use case that you have, and very iterative process. And usually the answer is somewhere in the messy middle, with a lot of different constraints that need to be met, right? And the way that you navigate to that messy middle is by deeply understanding the user's current process, understanding how users decide if the system is working, like what is the definition of quality, what's the definition of good in the system, and then experimentally discovering the combination of how things can fit together to achieve that objective, right? This is an example. I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. So let's say you are, as a founder, you're trying to understand, you're trying to build something for a target audience. And let's say you have a very good understanding of their current workflow, either because you are part of that target persona or because you've done your homework to understand what they do. So there is a current workflow, and normally this current workflow has very little agency, very, very little human-like interactions, and very little autonomy, which means that it doesn't happen on its own. And that's the problem that you're trying to solve. Our first instinct almost always is to jump down here and build something super sophisticated that talks to you like a human and dances like a human and does all the things autonomously and is like super, like, please don't do that. So the first step is to design an experiment that, for example, increases the autonomy in the current workflow a little bit. and see if that helps your target audience, right? Just a tiny bit, just moving one of these dimensions a little bit and see what happens, right? So let's say this is, I don't know, your social media post workflow that you sit down and you think about it, you write some notes on paper and you think which one is better for today, and then you do a bit of research. Like if that's the process you have, maybe just use ChatGPT simply to increase the autonomy of that process for you, right? So once you have this experiment, you can go back and think, okay, what problems did this solve? What problems did it not solve? Maybe the next time you say, okay, this is solving some of my problems, but I needed to interact with me better, right? Like I needed to ask me these questions every day as I'm, doing this workflow. So maybe you start building a bit of UX to make it a little more reflective and interactive with you. So you increase the agency for your second experiment. Again, like now you're looking at, okay, I have added a bit of autonomy, a bit of agency. What's going on? Like, is this helping? In what way can it be better? Then let's say you say, okay, I would like it to keep track of all the posts that I'm writing so that, tomorrow it can look at what I wrote in the previous days and, suggest something that is more diverse or whatever else, right? So you might add persistent memory and a tool calling so that it can read the post that you made and the engagement data from them, from the website, like the social media website. And maybe that's your third experiment. Then your next experiment might be uh, a system that increases a little more in agency and autonomy and automatically asks you clarification questions like, have you thought about posting about this given the trend of the post that you've been making? And these ones are getting good traction. So it is starting to interact with you like it is more like a coach, more like a then you might realize that you have overdone something. You might have made it too complicated with calling the website API, and that's giving you errors or whatever else, right? So you could simplify the logic and add some details. So the point is you're not always increasing these. Sometimes you have to backtrack and say, okay, well, actually this made the system unstable. I would like to go back to something that is more deterministic in terms of the amount of autonomy and agency I'm adding, so that we can have a more robust system. Because ultimately your goal is to have a robust system. If you have a system that works 70% of the time, that's not very interesting, is it? So, and you keep going, like you just keep doing experiments. Sometimes the experiments are not changing the autonomy or agency at all. Their purpose is, okay, this is working really well, but it is taking 3 minutes to do this. Can I do something on the engineering side to make it run faster, right? So that's nothing to do, like you're not changing the system functionally. You're just making it better from an engineering performance point of view, right? So this is the process through which usually you end up at good outcomes and good products that you can hopefully build and iterate on and get to interesting results, right? And this is not abstract, right? That's exactly what happened, for example, with things like the GPT models, right? So initially, this was a model that was pretty low in terms of autonomy and agency. And then, they did a significant amount of work on, training data and fine tuning, and GPT-3 became the model that had a little more autonomy, like it was able to interact with you a little more meaningfully in terms of executing linguistic tasks. Then RLHF came along to do human expectation alignment, human preference alignment. And that was definitely a movement along the agency side, because that was the technique that was used to go from GPT-3 to 3.5, which was the chat completion model that powered ChatGPT. So hopefully this is giving you, the sense of what I'm trying to describe here, which is, sometimes you're increasing the autonomy, sometimes you're increasing the agency as you're evolving your product, and sometimes on both aspects, you're getting a model that is more powerful. It can reason now, it can interact with tools better, etc. And you're making its user interactions more fluid and more human-like. So the agency is increasing. There are other examples that we can look at, but I want to wrap up here and start getting into the demo since we have only about 30 minutes left. I told you all of this to come to this point that as builders, we have a lot of toys available to us that allow us to build complicated, interesting things. But at the same time, there's also the burden of what should we build and how can we build it in a way that is meaningful? Because, we are the architects of the future that we are stepping into. We could sit around and complain about, corporate greed and, big corporations destroying the world and governments doing this and governments doing that. But ultimately, we are the builders. We are the ones who are building tools that hopefully thousands, millions of people are going to use and be impacted by. So along the way, we can definitely make a lot of decisions and design choices that could, contribute more to this future versus that future. And, I think it is an important burden on us to make sure that all of the steps that we take are intentional and with the purpose of, going towards human prosperity rather than towards, something that might not necessarily be meaningful. So it might be meaningful from a capitalist point of view, uh, but what I'm encouraging you to do is to think about implications of what you're doing, implications of what you're building, acknowledging the constraints, like regulations, as well as, capitalist world that we're living in. Those are constraints that exist. We cannot deny them. We cannot be wishful and say, oh, it will work itself out. It will not. Like we have to build solutions that acknowledge those constraints, but are responsible and meaningful in terms of the future that we would like to have. With that, I wrap up the presentation. Just putting this up quickly. And then I will move on to the demo. So please reach out to me if you want to discuss any of the above. Again, feel free to take a screenshot of this or email me and I can send you my calendar link. I do a lot of discovery calls with people who are building AI systems. If you would like to hire our services, like the training, advisory, or development, you can use this link. Otherwise, there's an Ask Me Anything link out there as well. You can use that to just have any conversation with me. And with that, I will wrap up. And maybe, Hesse, if you want, we can do a few QA before going to the workflow.
Yeah, that sounds good. That was great, Amir. Does anybody have any questions at this point before Amir gets into the demo? You can ask it in the chat, or you could just raise your hand and then just ask him verbally. Okay. Okay, not at this point. I think, okay, so you can go ahead, Amir, with the demo.
So I need a volunteer for the demo. Does anybody want to be my guinea pig?
That's not one way to entice people when you say you're going to be my guinea pig. Anybody want to volunteer?
I mean, I say guinea pig because I haven't tested what I'm going to show you, so it's going to be a bit of a wild card.
Okay, well, I'll volunteer.
Okay.
How about we do that? And just tell me what I need to do.
Sounds good. Let me reshare my screen and tell me when you see it.
Okay.
Can you see this?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, great. This should be my terminal that you're looking at, like a purple thing. Yes? Okay.
Yes.
I talked about things and discussed a lot of the complexities that exist in building these systems. But I want to balance that by showing you that you can also do it in very simple ways. So let me pull up. This is something that I've done a presentation at length on, and you all can go back to it and take a look at it if you want. You see my file browser, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. So essentially the way I use AI tools for my work as a solo founder is that I heavily rely on command line interface tools, although this might work for web versions as well. I do encourage you to use the CLI because that's a lot more useful, I think, or friendly. And what I do is that essentially all the prompts that I write for everything are text files. And I'm increasingly bringing a lot of my systems into this format, just having a bunch of text files. And I want to show you specifically the workflows. So I have a bunch of workflows that are practically, as I said, like a bunch of text files. And let me open, for example, this one. This is the ideation framework. This is whenever I want to solve a problem, I use this workflow to brainstorm with me. Did this open? Oh, it did. Okay, there you go. So this is something like this. This is literally a text file that says, okay, my step one is problem framing. This is the goal of this step. The input is this, and read this text file as the prompt for that step and write the output into this template file, right? So essentially a lot of my workflow is created like this, which are a bunch of, this is a YAML file if anybody wants to get too technical, that says, what are the steps that I want to execute? What are the prompts for those steps? And what template do I want to use to save this information, right? So now with that context, what I would like to do, and Hesse is going to help me with this, is to run one of these workflows that I'm happy to share with you, like with all the prompts and everything, that I created specifically for this presentation. This is a brainstorming workflow that tries to help you think through gaps in your thought process around an agentic system you want to build, okay? And what I did was simply ask it to run that workflow for me, and it has created this to-do list. And for the remaining 20 minutes, we are just gonna explore an idea that Hesse is considering to build. Like it could be a fake idea, like it doesn't need to be real. So just help me out here. Like, what is an idea that you've been thinking about that you potentially would be interested in building a product for example?
Okay. So one thing that we do on a monthly basis is reporting, but it takes a long time to actually retrieve the numbers that we need because they come out of different systems. They come out of HubSpot, they come out of Salesforce, and then they have to be tabulated into an Excel file. So what I would love to do is be able to extract the numbers that we need from those different systems and then automate the the input into the Excel spreadsheet.
Right. Okay. So I'm going to reframe that a little because we are pretending here that you're a founder who wants to launch this as a product rather than something for internal
Yes.
use. So essentially, you want to build a product that is focused on a pain point that you have yourself. That is creating reports is a very time-consuming process, and it requires a lot of data extraction and reformatting, et cetera, et cetera. Is that fair?
Correct. Correct.
Okay, great. So let me write all of that using my transcriber. Just give me 1 second, it's stopping. Come on, you can do it. Live demos never go well. Oh, done. Okay. Did capture everything, but that's okay. Let's put that in and see what happens. Okay. As you can see here, the way I use these workflows is that I literally just talk to them like we did. And it is following that workflow that I had with, with the prompts. and provides some feedback. So I'm going to read this so that you don't have to read it, saying, "That's fascinating. I love that you're building from your own pain point. That's often where the best products come from. The frustration of manually pulling data from multiple systems and then having to tabulate everything in Excel sounds incredibly time consuming. Tell me more about this. What specific numbers are you typically trying to extract, and how often do you find yourself going through this tedious process? I'm curious about the discovery story here. Was there a particular moment when you thought there has to be a better way that has sparked this? Also, when you envision this as a product that other people would use, do you think who would be your ideal user? Are you thinking about other people in similar roles to yours or a broader market?"
Okay. All right. So I think it usually comes to me on a monthly basis because it takes about 3 or 4 hours to actually do this. And so I know that there are easier ways, and I never thought of exploring it until now. But the idea is that, for example, we have a lot of clients, so a lot of startup founders, and we run many events on a monthly basis. So we have to record all those members who are participating in all those events, and we have to do it monthly
Right.
because, from a reporting perspective, it needs to be submitted to the ministry.
Hmm.
So to do that efficiently is not easy because we have
Right.
to go into Salesforce and we have to validate that some of the let's say the clients um, are existing or they're active, and then we put that all into a spreadsheet.
Mhm. Okay. So just to summarize what you said, the problem is that there's a compliance type of restriction that says you have to report these numbers and you have to do that regularly. But you do a lot of diverse set of activities and they exist in diverse systems. And often you have to just bring it all together to create a report and send it out to meet your compliance requirements. And that's very time consuming.
Yes.
It's like, it's not getting the end of what I'm saying. I have to look at it. All right. So I'm going to read this. That's really insightful. So you're dealing with a compliance reporting requirement that forces you into this monthly 3 to 4 hour data collection marathon. Can totally see how that would be both frustrating and ripe for automation. Let me make sure I understand the workflow. You're tracking startup founder participation in monthly events, then you need to cross-reference that against Salesforce to verify their client status, and then finally compile everything into a spreadsheet to meet the ministry reporting requirements. A few
Correct.
more questions. What specifically does the AI need to know to do this workflow? Is it mainly about data extraction and validation, or are there judgment calls that currently require your human insight? When you say ministry reporting, are there specific formatting requirements and data validation rules? Besides the time saving for yourself, what excites you most about turning this into a product? Are you thinking about other organizations that might have these similar compliance headaches? Was there a specific month where this process was particularly painful that made you think, I need to solve this now?
Okay. So let me see here. What specifically does AI need to know to do this? So it needs to know um, the sources where I'm getting it from. It also depends on me or someone else having to input all those events on Salesforce. If they're not inputted, then you can't export a report.
Mm,
So that's a huge thing. So and I think that that's a big part of it because if I don't do it, then I have to input everything before I
right.
even export the report. From a ministry perspective, I don't have access to that, but I think that we would essentially export some of the main insights from the reporting, let's say the totals, and then put it into a formal doc. And I think that's more of a manual process. It would be great if that could be we could actually template that. Um, but data validation rules, it's not, I think as long as that we can reconcile this is the right company and they attended X event on a given month, I think we're good with that. So please let me say, what excites you about turning this into a product? It will literally save us a lot of time because this is only just one component of the reporting. We have so many other events that we do that there are literally like 30
Yep.
different entries that we have to do on a monthly basis. And this is across marketing, this is across events, and this is across just programming.
Right. Okay. I'm gonna get a stop there. So what it is doing again, like it is following the prompts that I have provided to it in the back end, and it's going through them one by one. And like if you were doing this with ChatGPT, it was very open-ended, like he would just go in any direction. But now it is following exactly the framework that I defined for it to follow. And one of the very interesting things that I usually bake into these things is to call you out when you say, very vague and fuzzy things. So we'll see if it ends up doing that here, but we'll see.
Okay.
All right. In this to-do step that you see also that exists here is that since I would like it not to be tied to any particular system, I'm saving everything as text files instead of the memory of ChatGPT or the memory of this or that. But I don't want to trust the type of memory they have. I want to give it a template and say, this is the summary that I would like to have from this brainstorming session.
Okay.
So let's just say, go ahead and write the doc based on what I said so far. Okay, so now I'm going to show you what this document also looks like. So most of these tools that you typically use, they have their own memory and they have their own logic for storing information in the memory. And but I would like this to be very specific, like just information that I would like to store. And let me find it. Sorry, where did you find it? No, I forgot to look at where it saved it. Found the validation. Okay. That's one of the problems that you have to know. Okay. Gonna bring this document here. And, like for collaboration purposes, if you want to share this with somebody else, it's already nicely formatted and you can send it to some other person, like the original idea description, structured summary of what we've discussed so far, et cetera, right? So we'll keep going because you have a little more time and see what it is saying. So the next thing that when I'm talking to founders, I usually, after this, initial interaction with them, I usually like to poke in their idea a little to find what are the gaps in their thinking, right? And as you can see in the process that I've built is, okay, ask a few questions that probes the gaps that we think they have. And the back end in the prompt, I have a long list of these are the gaps that I usually see. So figure out based on the current articulation, what are the potential gaps? And it is asking questions for those. I let you look at these and just give me any sort of unstructured thoughts about these.
Yeah. I think if we're doing the reporting, then most accelerators will have to do this on a
Mhm.
monthly basis. We all have to report on typically the same numbers, right? We all have to report on the cohort activity. We have to report on the number of programs that we have and who's attending them. So this is, I would say, industry wide when it comes to the Ministry of Economic Development and across accelerators. Um, have you thought about more behind the scenes automation that just works quietly? It would be great if during one of, let's say, the workshops, and I don't know if this is real, but once a workshop is completed, it could actually export um, all the attendees to that workshop, because not everybody attends, but people are registered.
Right.
And it would automatically put in like those numbers into Salesforce for me instead of
Right.
me having to do it afterwards. And then that would feed into the final reporting. That would be great. And I think if something like this would be done, we could actually make it available to all the organizations. It would have to be a little bit custom, but in terms of the reporting requirements, they will be fairly consistent.
So do you want to take a step at 4 too? I think that's also interesting.
How do you manage or would discover using something like this? They will use it. I think because it's one of those tasks that usually is done at the last minute before the mandatory report to the ministry. So it, like I said, it usually takes a lot of time. So if it could be done while if parts of it could be done, like the input into Salesforce could be done at the time that the workshop happens, that would be great. And then at the end, when we go to do the reporting, we could just run a prompt to actually extract all that stuff, put it into the Excel spreadsheet, and then just do final validation on the numbers. Validation actually would be good, because if I have to do a manual validation across, we do it on a quarterly basis. Um, that's manageable, but if I had to do it on a month, sorry, a yearly basis, that would be harder
Yep.
and take longer.
Okay, sounds good. I'm hoping that it will challenge the assumption that you made about people will use it.
No.
So let's
Okay.
see what it says. Okay, this is really valuable. This is an industry-wide pain. One more question to round this up. What's your gut feeling about the investment side? If you could wave a magic wand and have this system working perfectly, what do you think would be a reasonable cost for an accelerator to pay? Right, that's a good question. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think that they'd be willing to pay even like a SaaS model fee, whether or not it be or yearly. And given the number of users, I think that they would reasonably pay, let's say $20, $10 to $15, $10 to $20 per seat per month to be able to do this.
Okay.
And
Sounds
I
good.
just do this based on how long it takes for everyone
To that, yes.
okay. Because
Okay.
everything I say is more like it's my own context, right? But
Yeah,
I'm making a
absolutely.
huge assumption that, yeah,
Yeah.
this is valuable.
So I can explain how I built this later and what a specific problem I am trying to solve with this workflow. But let me actually show you the summary that it added. So, okay, you saw that we had the summary. Now you added this other part, which is the gap assessment. Questions that were asked were these ones, the analysis. You're not supposed to look at this, but uh, strong assumption that they will use it. I love it. I didn't record this. I didn't record that I said that, by the way.
Okay.
But no evidence of actual conversations with target users. Okay, I think that's fair, given what we said, not your context, right?
Yeah.
Workflow disruption assumes organization will adapt real-time data entry, blah, blah, blah. Okay, yes, good. Data dependency and technical complexity. As you can see, like, again, like in the template, I have described what kind of information from the conversation I would like to save and use it for the next step.
Right.
And if at this time I'm using Claude right now, but if at this point I'm like, okay, I'm bored of Claude, I want to go use Gemini, all of these are saved in a file. I'll just attach this file into that conversation and continue, right? So this is a very portable setup. Okay. So what it is saying is, okay, interesting. Your case reminds me of a few projects I've heard about recently. Let me share a couple quick stories, and I'm curious what you think might have gone wrong. There was this founder, Jessica, who built an AI tool that would automatically sync event attendance data between registration platforms and CRMs in real time. She was super excited because it would eliminate all of the manual data entry. She managed to get 15 accelerators and co-working spaces to sign up for a pilot, but unfortunately couldn't get real traction after the first few weeks. What do you think went wrong? You see what it is doing, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Interesting. This is I mean, to me, it's a real problem. I think,
Yes.
uh, nobody likes reporting. It's part of everybody's task, but I mean, if people are willing to just do it manually, and to me, it's an efficiency
Yeah.
issue, especially when you work in an accelerator where we only have 4 employees,
Yeah.
right? It's a time suck. So maybe
So,
some people don't have that issue.
yeah. Can I stop you here?
Sure.
It's not about you. It's about Jessica. What do you think went wrong
Oh,
in Jessica's
Jessica.
case? Yeah.
Mm,
Privacy issue is a good one. Yeah. Do you think that
it
might
could
have
be
been the reason?
privacy. I think privacy is a big part of it. Like I think the security of the data, like and being, that idea of client data leaking
Hmm.
potentially could be an issue. I think that is the biggest part of it is
Right.
compliance and the potential liability if anything goes wrong.
Okay. Let's put that in and see what happens. But you see, like essentially, it is trying to separate you from the problem that you're trying to solve and
Okay.
say, this other person tried and it didn't work. What do you think happened?
Oh, got
Right?
it. Got it.
Um, yeah, that's fine. Has this bad habit that when you mention the word think, it thinks that you think
Oh,
serious thinking. Um, okay. Second story. Okay. There was this founder, David. As you can see, it is asking you a question and we answered it. So let's see. The second story is there was this founder, David, who created an AI reporting system that could pull data from multiple sources and generate beautiful compliance report. It worked amazingly well in demos. It could connect to Salesforce event platforms and generate ministry-ready reports in minutes, but when actual customers tried to implement it, they kept hitting roadblocks and eventually gave up on integration. What do you think went wrong in David's case?
I think that his situation might have been more tuned to solving his particular problem. And despite the fact that you're integrating like with Salesforce and other platforms, it doesn't necessarily mean that the requirements are going to be the same. So I think there needs to be some kind of customization in all of this stuff. It you know, if the premise works, are people willing to add that little bit of
Hmm.
a few more features to customize to their own requirements?
Right. So you're saying that it might have worked for the first customer, but the customization need to integrate it into their system might have been too much to lift.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There need to be actual requirements that are specific to them.
Just based on the gaps that it found in your articulation. We're just going to move forward since we want to just get to the end. We're out of time. Let's move on to the next step. Assume that my answer to this story was just okay. Again, like we're trying to move on, not really do this.
Okay.
I do use these workflows, honestly, like I actually sit down and thoughtfully answer, and they go in very interesting places. Okay, again, like it updated the document. So this is the case study analysis. It is telling you what the stories were. And now it's going to do a reflection on the answers we provided, which is step 4, and it's going to reframe the problem. But you can see that it's a very structured, like as Parisa said in the chat, a lot of the time when we do this in an unstructured way with ChatGPT or whatever tool we're using, it doesn't necessarily end up addressing the devil's advocate side of things. Like it doesn't push us to think. But while if you're talking to a coach, to a advisor, etc., or you're talking to me about how can I just implement this, a lot of these details really matter in terms of what kind of agentic system you can design or you should design. Because especially if you want to launch this as a product, if any of these things go wrong, you probably don't have a product on your hand. So here you can see that it pretends that, oh, sorry about that tangent. Those stories reminded blah, blah, blah. So it tries to engage with you in a conversation and highlights that, yeah, privacy and concerns or over customization can kill it. So it tries to reframe your problem statement. And again, like we can engage with it and clarify and interact, etc., to make it cleaner if we were actually doing it for real. But it does, it does document, again, according to the template I gave it, it does give it a reframed idea that says AI-powered compliance reporting system for accelerators that automate data extraction and generates minister report with understanding that privacy concerns are a major adoption barrier and over customization kills. So it tries to reframe the problem and expand it to say that these are things that we have to validate. So these are the risk dimensions that we explored, etc. Right? Yeah. And the last step is that it just gives you a minimal prototype plan that you can build in half a day and use it to test it against a few potential people from your customer group, right? And gets you to commit to some small experiment. So let's just read what it said. Based on our discussion, I want to help you think through what you actually need to build first to validate this. In terms of agency that is interactive, engaging with the users like a chatbot or autonomy, system executing steps automatically. Given your compliance reporting use case, what's your gut feeling? Do accelerators need to interact with the AI? So we have talked about these, like it is just verifying that information. You want to build something in half a day to show real value. What can it be? So it is like brainstorming with you that, okay, let's time constrain this to half a day. We just want to do something in half a day so that we can take it to some people and ask them questions. What is that, right? And you could ask it to answer some of these questions itself, like brainstorm with you, etc. But it is following that general structure of, okay, I hear what you're saying, but have you thought about these things? And then it tries to disconnect you from the problem and say, Jessica had this problem, David had this problem. What do you think went wrong? To just, allow you to see some of the assumptions you're making. And eventually it's going to go ahead and, help you design an experiment that you can quickly run.
Okay.
So it's not that complicated to set up things like this to, help you brainstorm and design systems.
Okay.
The end.
Very cool. That's really cool. I really like that. And that didn't take what, 20 minutes? Not even.
Yeah, for us, exactly. Like it took me about 90 minutes to create this, but I can tell you why. But yeah, but executing, 20, 30 minutes. Like if you were honestly answering questions, it probably would have been 45 minutes. But 45 minutes will give you something very concrete to try. versus having to spend, like you might have been sitting on this idea for a month, for weeks, but now it is telling you, okay, you could probably try this in half a day and get a little more data about this idea and move on.
Okay.
Okay, that's it.
Okay, great. Thank you. I think Parisa had a couple of questions in the chat.
Yeah, we
Oh,
looked
you
at
would.
them. I think as we
Oh, you
were
talked about it.
talking.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, okay. Yeah, that's cool. Anybody else have any questions? I think this is great. If you want to connect with Amir on his tool, and I get that this is called the brainstorm. Is this a brainstorm interface? What's it? Do you have a name for this?
This is, as I showed you, literally a bunch of text files. I can share those text files with you, and you
Okay,
can attach them to any tool you use.
okay, very cool. Okay.
Yeah,
All right. So, if there are no questions, thank you so much, Amir,
of
for
course.
coming this to talk to us about this. This is, I think, this is critical to anybody that's building any kind of solution, especially in the coming weeks or months. So stay tuned, everyone, for part two with Patricia Thane as well as Abigail Dubinieski. And I thank everyone for coming. So take care and have a great day. Thanks, Amir.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for the questions and comments.
Yes.
I also turned it into a PDF. I'll share it with you in case you want it.
Yeah, that would be great. That would be great. Okay, I'm going to just stop recording at this point.